Part of Dead by Daylight's lore is that certain cosmetics in the game will canonically change your character to a different character entirely. For instance, Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil can be transformed into Chris Redfield, and Alan Wake can be transformed into Saga Anderson. Currently, there is only one case of an original DBD survivor having a legendary skin, which makes it so Hinatu Lira can be transformed into Tubero, who is an operator from Rainbow Six Siege. For a lore head like me, this aspect of Dead by Daylight makes me more excited than if you were to tell any white person that Chick-fil-A was now going to be open on Sundays. It also opens the door for new franchises to be represented in DBD. So in this video, we're going to suggest a legendary skin for every survivor in Dead by Daylight. The ground rules that I'm setting for myself are as follows. If the base character is licensed, then the legendary skin must come from the same license. If the base character is original, then the legendary skin has to be the same gender and race as them, unless they're being replaced by a character whose race is not already represented in Dead by Daylight. And finally, I can only use one character from each license, so this video doesn't just end up me going like this. Speaking of Twin Peaks, I'm going to blow that load immediately. I want Dale Cooper as a legendary skin for Dwight Fairfield, and I want it now. In Twin Peaks, Special Agent Cooper gets called into Twin Peaks to investigate a murder, and my goodness, this man is just a ray of sunshine and hope in the show. I love him. He's such a wholesome, intense, quirky dude, and I feel like Twin Peaks is a franchise that fits in super well with Dead by Daylight. I could see Cooper having voice lines about wanting coffee, or having his supernatural premonitions being intensified by the entity's realm. Twin Peaks also inspired Alan Wake, which in turn inspired the creation of Dead by Daylight, so it would be very prudent of them to hit up David Lynch and get the contract signed. For Meg Thomas, I picked Naru from Prey. It's no secret that Dead by Daylight lacks indigenous representation, and Naru is a terrific example of a fit, badass Native American woman who faced a Yautja head-on in the Predator prequel. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we get an actual Predator chapter in DBD, but in the meantime, we're just going to include Naru right here in this video. Claudette Morel, I think, should be Clementine from Telltale's The Walking Dead. Clem sealed herself in the Horror Gaming Hall of Fame as we all watched her grow up in the zombie apocalypse and come into her own as a survivor. So what better way to reward that than by sucking her into a realm full of pure torture and horror for an ambiguous eternity. For Jake Park, I picked Sok Woo from Train to Busan, though I could easily be swayed into saying Song Ji-hoon from Squid Game. But to me, Train to Busan is just the ultimate zombie film. From the pandemonium of the sudden outbreak in a closed space, to the social commentary on class structure in Korea, to the heart-wrenching moments that take place all throughout, it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think Korean horror is fantastic, and I think it would be a great way to be represented in Dead by Daylight. The legendary skin that I picked for Nia Carlson is Maxine from the 2022 movie X. Honestly, if you haven't seen X and you're old enough, go watch it. It's one of the best slashers of the past 10 years, in my opinion. Maxine is a rebellious girl looking to become a star, and as such, she and her friends rent out a guest home from an elderly couple so they can shoot a movie. This movie spawned a prequel with Pearl, and Maxine will star in a sequel named Maxine, where she goes to Hollywood to try to make it big. So the Halloween franchise is kind of in a weird spot. It's been retconned and overwritten in alternate universe to no end, so most protagonists that could be legendary skins for Laurie Strode have either been pretty lame or so far removed from canon that they may as well not exist anymore. So I guess I would just pick Allison Nelson from the new trilogy. There's not a whole lot of options here, and I don't really like any of them, so that's the best I've got. I think Frank West from Dead Rising is worthy of being his own survivor in Dead by Daylight. However, his high-risk, high-reward mentality and overall scrappy nature make me feel like if Dead Rising were to never come to Dead by Daylight as a chapter, I think he could be a pretty decent fit for a legendary skin for Ace Visconti. He's a photojournalist who chases a lead to what he believes could be a big story and winds up smack dab in the middle of ground zero of the zombie apocalypse. Left 4 Dead has such a good cast of characters across the franchise that it is pretty hard to pick a legendary skin for Bill Overbeck. The two that I would fight between are Coach and Ellis from Left 4 Dead 2, but I would be leaning more towards Ellis. I can think of no one who would have more to say in the entity's realm than Ellis. The voice lines of him trying to cheer up his fellow survivors in the face of danger, or all of his me and my buddy Keith stories, I just really want to see that happen. After Bill Overbeck came the Sparks of Madness chapter, which featured Fung Min as a survivor. And while this isn't a horror license, I think thematically, Evelyn from Everything Everywhere All at Once would be a great fit for Dead by Daylight. Evelyn is a woman who suddenly gains access to all of her lives from across the multiverse, and a big plot point in the movie is that she becomes obsessed with her multiversal selves. From a lore perspective, it could easily be said that while messing with the multiverse, she got the attention of the entity and wound up in its realm. Either way, I do think I would like to see it. For David King, I'm going with a famous British horror icon, Shaun from Shaun of the Dead. He's a guy who is perfectly content with his life of mediocrity, just chilling at the pub and watching TV, until suddenly everything went to crap when the apocalypse started. I would absolutely 100% pivot to being a Shaun main if he were to come to Dead by Daylight, especially if he were voiced by Simon Pegg. Quentin Smith is a very obvious choice. We need to get Nancy Thompson from the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies. When Dead by Daylight originally sought out this license, they were only permitted to use the 2010 reboot, but I feel like if they had the size, the money, and the cultural impact then as they do now, then Dead by Daylight probably could have gotten a little bit more out of the Nightmare on Elm Street license, and I think this would have been a really cool thing to bring into DBD. For Detective Tapp, I would like to see a legendary skin for Adam from the original Saw film. I just feel like he's such an important part of the first film, and he's one of the most iconic characters that doesn't end up becoming just another Jigsaw apprentice eventually. I know I just summoned a swarm of actuallys in the comments from Saw fans, but I'd like to see Adam. A lot of my picks in this video, as you'll come to see, are contemporary horror picks, and I really wanted to continue that trend by giving Kate Denson a skin to make her Grace from Ready or Not, partially because I think Sam Weaving is great, and she sealed herself in the Horror Hall of Fame with her iconic tropical bird scream. But that being said, it's only fair that I show some old horror some love and give this spot to Sally Hardesty from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Not only does this show a little love to a classic horror franchise, and one that is only represented by a killer in Dead by Daylight, but it's also a nice little nod to how Kate was originally leaked in the files when the Leatherface DLC came to DBD, which suggests that she may have been planned to release alongside him before being moved to come out with the clown. Adam Francis should have a legendary skin for Eric Brooks, who is otherwise known as Blade from Marvel Comics. Eric's mother was bitten by a vampire during childbirth, which made him half vampire and unable to be turned. This also instilled a hatred in him of all vampires, and he seeks to eradicate them from the face of the earth. This would bring comic book horror to Dead by Daylight, and bring in yet another survivor for players to whine about power scaling for the umpteenth time. I've all but given up hope on Marvel Studios to actually make that movie with Mahershala Ali, because it's been in development hell for like 5 years, and I'm sure the Xbox game with Blade is still about 8 years off based on the state of the industry, so having him in Dead by Daylight would be a fun option to tide me over in the meantime. Now we have Jeff Johansson, who is a big hairy guy who's into metal music. I think it's only fitting to bring in another big hairy guy who's into metal music by giving Jeff a skin that turns him into the one and only Jack Black. Just the guy. DBD devs have already said that the occult, often satanic imagery of metal music is more than enough for them to consider metal a part of horror, and as the frontman of Tenacious D, I'd argue that this gives Jack Black a seat at the table. The dude is full of life and energy, and the voice lines that he could bring would just be immaculate. I'm just gonna say that. This next one is not very realistic, since the Wright shoulders have burned a few bridges that would need to be left standing for this to happen, but I think Sam Carpenter from the Scream franchise would have been a great pick for a legendary skin for Jane Romero. I just think that Sam is a more interesting character than Tara with all of the stuff surrounding her and her story, but like I said, it probably won't ever happen, so that's a bummer. The Evil Dead franchise basically has three main protagonists in the form of Ash for most of the franchise, Mia for the 2013 reboot quel, and Beth from Evil Dead Rise. Of the other two protagonists, I would like to see Mia as a legendary skin for Ash more so than Beth, but I could see either of them really. Ever since Stranger Things Season 4 debuted a couple of years ago, people have been clamoring for Eddie to come to Dead by Daylight, and since Season 3 people have been saying that Robin should be a legendary skin for Nancy. However, I think those are basic. I think what DBD really needs is to get Joyce Byers and Jim Hopper in the fog, and I would pick those two as the legendary skins for Nancy and Steve. I think they're much more iconic characters to Stranger Things, and to me, it interests me more thematically to see them wind up in the Entity's realm than just two more teenagers. I think Yui Kimura should get a legendary skin for Noriko from Battle Royale. Basically, this movie is like the OG Hunger Games. It's a class of high schoolers that are forced to fight each other to the death, and Noriko is constantly on the run from the higher powers trying to force all of this onto her, and I could absolutely see her being taken into the Entity's realm to be a survivor in Dead by Daylight after the events of the second film, which take place a few years later when she is an adult, and that's what Dead by Daylight devs have said. Everybody who comes to Dead by Daylight is at least age 18. I have spent probably the better part of an hour researching, trying to see if there are any mainstream horror properties that feature an Arabic woman that would be a good legendary skin for Zarina Kassir, and I've just come up with blanks. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I get to interact with the Dead by Daylight community pretty much every day, and I've seen a lot of people that talk about how important it is to them that they can see representation in the survivors or in the killers that reflects their ethnicities or their backgrounds. So that's why I've been trying to kind of keep things roughly the same ethnicity for everybody. If you disagree, that's your prerogative, but that's why I'm trying to keep this like the way that I'm doing it. So to try to keep the same general region of the world for Zarina Kassir, I guess I would go with like Farah from Overwatch. Another shooter crossover, kind of like Tubero, though it seems like it would be a little impractical to incorporate her as a Dead by Daylight survivor with this big ol' set of armor on, but without it, I don't know if she'd be that recognizable, so I'm not sure. So Cheryl Mason already holds the record for the most legendary skins in Dead by Daylight because we've got Lisa Garland, Sybil Bennett, James Sunderland, and Maria, but Silent Hill is still missing one very iconic character in the form of Harry Mason. My goodness, he is such a good guy and a good protagonist and a good dad. He and Cheryl need to be given the opportunity to reunite in the Entity's realm, even though it's basically hell over there, but still, like, I want to see those two back together. This next character is one that I've wanted in Dead by Daylight for the past several years, and I can't really think of any survivor that makes a great fit for this character as a legendary skin, but we're almost all out of original white boys from DBD, and so Felix Richter is getting relegated this. I think he should have a legendary skin for Sherlock Holmes. Genuinely one of the most influential characters in all of fiction, and he's researched all sorts of horrendous crimes, so I could see Sherlock finding some sort of relic from the Entity's realm and becoming obsessed with cracking that code a lot quicker than any normal human being would do, and getting sucked into the Entity's realm as a result. Thematically, a brilliant choice if you ask me. But like I said, I've been advocating for this publicly for the past 3 years, so I'm a little bit biased. When I started making this list, I knew I wanted at least one Jordan Peele character to be on it. I was thinking maybe I could do Chris Washington from Get Out, Adelaide from Us, but what I decided is that for Elodie Rakoto, I would like to see a legendary skin that transforms her into Emerald Haywood from Nope. Keke Palmer just delivered an electric performance for Emerald. She's such a charismatic and bright character, and if they're able to get Keke to record the voice lines for her in Dead by Daylight, she would knock it out of the park, and I think she would be a great addition to DBD. So you guys remember Parasite, won Best Picture, directed by Bong Joon-ho? Well, about 13 years before that, he directed a horror movie called The Host, and just randomly in that film, there's a character named Park Nam-joo, who's a very skilled archer and uses those skills to fight against the monster. And that being said, I think she'd be a really cool addition to the Entity's realm as a legendary skin for Yoon-Jin Lee. Rather than do 2 legendary skins for Resident Evil characters right now and then 2 more a few characters from now, I'm just going to bundle them all together. For Jill Valentine, I'm going to say Barry Burton, who's a fellow STARS member and the guy who coined the forever iconic
You are almost a Jill sandwich.
For Leon Kennedy, I think I'd pick Luis Serra from Resident Evil 4. He's that sexy Spaniard guy who invented the Nemesis and then betrayed Umbrella. Very cool character in my opinion. For Ada Wong, we would give her Jake Muller, the son of Albert Wesker and one of the many protagonists of Resident Evil 6. And finally, for Rebecca Chambers, we'll go with Sherry Birkin, who is the daughter of William Birkin, the G-Virus guy, and she also is a Resident Evil 6 protagonist. I know I just picked 3 male characters and 1 woman, but that brings the total Resident Evil survivor count to 6 women and 6 men, so I feel this is appropriate. Also, I know people are going to be asking why I skipped out on Ethan Winters. That's because Capcom seems allergic to showing his face, so you can argue with the wall on that one. For Michaela Reed, I picked Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's not much to tell you about who she is or what she does that isn't already revealed by her title. It's just a fun, campy show, and Sarah Michelle Gellar is so iconic that I would love to see it happen. I'm going to do the IRL celebrity thing again for Jonah Vasquez like I did for Jeff Johansson with Jack Black. I would love to see Danny Trejo come to DBD. He's already been in the Predator, Halloween, and From Dusk Till Dawn franchises, so he's got a lot of horror experience under his belt, and he also just seems like a really fun-loving guy in real life. And I think he could very easily deliver a performance that is on par with Nick Cage's. Furthermore, also like Nicolas Cage, Danny Trejo seems to be the kind of actor who just likes to work and will take most anything that is suggested to him. So if Dead by Daylight were to approach him, his response would probably be, yes, but what is Dead by Daylight? For Yoichi Asakawa, I would pick his mom. Reiko is a protagonist of Ring and is an icon in her own right. As someone who has seen the movie, I can definitely understand why people were up in arms about her not being picked for Dead by Daylight, but I can also see why Yoichi was picked, if that makes sense. Either way, I kind of assumed that Reiko was eventually going to come as a legendary skin for Yoichi, and I'm really surprised that it hasn't happened yet. Hattie Core, I think, is someone who could be a great base character for a Velma Dinkley skin. People have been begging for Scooby-Doo representation in Dead by Daylight, and while I'm not super convinced that that is something that should exist in this world, Velma has been portrayed as several different ethnicities over the years, and unfortunately, the one that matches Hattie's is the one that everybody hates. So I'll just leave it up to the viewer's choice which iteration of Velma gets added, because none of this is real or actually going to happen anyway. This next one is going to raise some eyebrows, but let me cook. Give Vittorio Toscano a skin that turns him into Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3. Astarion is an elven vampire that can be recruited into your party, and his story is so perfect. It just encapsulates the themes of cycles of abuse, the need for vulnerability to those close to you, and it's just to the point where I love his character so much, and I think he would be a great fit for Dead by Daylight. Plus, we would get Neil Newbin into the recording booth, which would be absolutely awesome. I know Dungeons & Dragons is already in DBD, but this entire video and the previous one about killer legendary skins all spawned from an Oddstarva video where you see the back of Vittorio and he looks uncannily like Astarion.
So right now, our friend has 2 options, right? Either hit Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3 right here.
So to me, I had to include this one since that's what inspired this video in the first place. You guys are gonna kill me because I'm picking another hero shooter character right now, but as a guy who really likes the Titanfall universe that Respawn Entertainment created, seeing Loba from Apex Legends and DBD as a legendary skin for Talita Lyra would be pretty dope. She was born into a pretty affluent family, her parents were thieves, but then a hitman named Revenant killed her parents in front of her. She became a street rat for a very long time and then became a professional thief just like her parents, and she was able to use like a teleportation bracelet to get in and out of places to collect her scores. But then she found out that Revenant was part of the Apex games, and so she decided to join so she could get revenge on him like a true professional hater. She's got that chaotic, neutral, lone wolf vibe to her, as her name's Loba, which is wolf, and that kind of energy certainly has a spot in Dead by Daylight. I'm gonna be honest, there isn't really any Brazilian horror IP that I could see as iconic enough to make it into Dead by Daylight, and Renato Lira already has one legendary skin that comes from a shooty bang bang game. So rather than subject Lucio from Overwatch to all the horrors of a DBD trial, we're just gonna go with Eddie Gordo from Tekken. Alright, ladies and gentlemen of the chat, I am once again going to have to ask you to allow me to cook with this one. Gabriel Soma's story is about a man who's working for a company and he has to brave potentially dangerous planets in order to find out where humanity could go to preserve their species. As such, hear me out, I feel like his story very thematically echoes the story of the employee from Lethal Company. The cherry on top would be to make his lobby idle animation that default dance from Lethal Company. I cooked. Admit it. Nicolas Cage is in a weird spot because there's no way you could do a legendary skin for him that turns him into someone else. That would be a legal nightmare. I suggest is see if Nick Cage will allow you to do a blighted skin of him. I guess. For Ellen Ripley, I present to you two options. Option 1, Dwayne Hicks from Aliens. He's just this badass Marine guy who helps Ellen and the gang stay alive. Option 2 would be Bishop, who is also from Aliens. What would make Bishop a really cool option is he's an android, which would be a new concept for Dead by Daylight. Anybody who knows me knows that Remedy is one of my favorite game developers of all time, and Alan Wake 2 and Control are two of my favorite games of all time. So, if it were up to me, I would add just a few legendary skins for Alan Wake. First, we do Casper Darling, who's a character from Control. He's a wholesome, goofy, ambiguously gay scientist who's obsessed with other dimensions. So it only makes sense that he would willingly science himself into the entity's realm just to study it. And then next we'd have Alex Casey, who doubles as a character in an Alan Wake novel and a detective investigating disappearances related to Alan Wake. I also would want to see Jessie Faden, who's the director of the Federal Bureau of Control, and she investigates paranormal occurrences across the world. We also have Barry Wheeler, who is Alan's best friend and former manager, also a great choice. And finally, Ati the janitor, who is a clearly powerful but aging person who can seemingly move between realms at will. That's just a couple that I'd like to see. For Sable Ward, you've got to go with Elvira, the Mistress of Darkness. You just gotta. For those of you not in the know, back in the day, there would be horror hosts and hostesses that would introduce the next film in a marathon or interject their commentary, and Elvira was one of the more iconic hostesses. If you don't know who she is, your parents probably do. She's an icon of icons for not only horror, but for the LGBTQ community. This is also very thematically fitting with Sable Ward as a base character because Sable Ward's a little bit witchy. She's into commentating horror stuff on a radio show. If you leave this video hating on me for suggesting like 5 hero shooter characters, I hope you could at least concede that this pick is a hit. And finally, for the troop, the Dungeons & Dragons survivors, I would like to see them utilize the ultra rare cosmetic function where they add a brand new character model so that they could add additional Dungeons & Dragons races to Dead by Daylight. Whether it's like a tiefling or a dragonborn, an Aarakocra, or an orc, I'd love to see a more extreme non-human representation in Dead by Daylight than just an elf. Like, I'm super happy we got an elf, don't get me wrong, but I just want something even more now, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So there you have it, those were my suggestions for one legendary skin for each survivor in Dead by Daylight. I know there were several misses, so if there is something that you feel like you have a better idea, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear. I loved hearing all the ideas for the one where I suggested skins for killers, so just keep them coming. But that being said, my name is freaking Nick. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you guys on the next one.